Hey guys, welcome back to the Cloud Computing Insider YouTube channel and podcast. And this is actually going on LinkedIn Live as well. My name's Dave Linthicke. I'm your host, author, speaker, B-list geek, and here to tell you about the truth of cloud computing and how to make it work for your enterprise. And today I'm joined by Doug Merritt. Doug is the chairman, chief executive officer, and president at Aviatrix. Most recently, Doug served as Splunk's president and CEO from 2015 to 2021. During his tenure as CEO, Doug led the transformation of Splunk from an on-premise perpetual license software company with an equivalent of $220 million in annual recurring revenue, which is impressive on its own, to a cloud-based SaaS company with an annual recurring revenue of $3.12 billion. And first time we went through this, I forgot to hit record. And we had this great conversation and asked him the same question. That's an amazing accomplishment. As someone's been CEO twice and has not done anything close to that, how did you pull that off? What's your secret?
A great team and an insane amount of work. It was an absolute honor to be with Splunk for the years I was there. I was actually there as head of sales for a year and a half before becoming becoming the CEO overall. But it was the hardest part, I think, about the entire thing, and why I have much more appreciation for why companies really shy away, if you're public, from going through this transformation, is managing your investor base through the incredible upheaval. There's, as we know, tens of thousands of investments out there that any public company investor can make across every industry known to man. And when you're going through a transformation like Splunk is, there's a lot of questions that people have of, hey, there's clean stories out there in tech and in other industries. Why do I want to be an investor in your stock when there's so much turbulence on revenue, on cash flow, on op margin? Because cloud upends all the core metrics that you went public around or were once reporting around. So that it was shocking because going in, I knew how hard it was going to be on a technology basis. How do you take something that's highly stateful and vertical scale out and built around the last generation data centers and make it a microservices oriented, separate compute and storage, which is really hard on a data product like Splunk was, and make it native within AWS and other clouds. Like that's hard. All the process change internally is hard. Like we weren't used to accounting for revenue on a daily and monthly basis. That impacts every IT system. Cultural change internally is hard. How do you sell SaaS versus how do you sell on-prem software? Engineering methodology change is hard. Like all that stuff there is a corner of the company that doesn't have to almost change diametrically from what they were once doing. And then honestly, through all that, the street was the hardest.
So are you one of those guys motivated by challenges, not cash? That's
sadly, yeah. I did triathlons for almost 30 years of my life.
Oh wow.
Yeah, I'm a glutton. Going back to like I was retired and have been fortunate enough where we've done pretty well as a family economically, and for some reason I decided to wade right back into a super intensive operational role. But I think it goes back to I love teams. I love the complexity that comes from being committed to something that's hard to actually do and big challenges. If you're doing it for the right purpose and you're serving an audience that really needs the help, that to me is I can't imagine being retired, honestly, because I found I missed that so much. That's what gets me motivated every day.
Yeah, I can't imagine it either. It's always like, people, when are you going to stop? And I says, there's no reason to stop. I'm just having such a good time, and I think you're in the same category. So let's get into your new company, Aviatrix, and can you get into what you do as a company? Explain it to the listeners, and also tell us what made you decide to join the company as their CEO, and what were some of the attributes that you saw as kind of diamonds in the rough to kind of take everything to the next level.
Yes, we'd love to. So on a simple basis, we are a networking abstraction layer that makes the movement of workloads and the running of workloads in the cloud and between clouds in your on-prem footprint, which most companies still have, make it much simpler. For any of you out there that have had the joy of building apps in the cloud, we all learn pretty quickly, man, it's completely different. If you have a last gen app, you've got to almost rewrite it from scratch or do so much reconstruct that doesn't look the same to have it work the way it needs to work to actually take advantage of the hundreds of billions of dollars that AWS and GCP and Oracle and Microsoft have invested in these beautiful data centers. And networking is no different. The concept's the same. It hasn't changed from the days of Cisco and Juniper and Bay Networks and the amazing work that Arista and others have done. We're still dealing with IPv4 and IPv6 and BGP, but the way that the technology is built is radically different. And we've been on this for almost 10 years. We were founded by a female founder. And Aviatrix is a female pilot, which I didn't know until I joined Aviatrix. But we're thrilled, honored to be a female-founded company, and she was deep in the bowels of Cisco engineering and the Internet Operating System, the iOS framework within Cisco, and looked over at AWS, which was pretty nascent in 2014-15. It wasn't quite the juggernaut that it is today, and realized networking isn't done as well as it could be in AWS. And it makes sense. Like they're obviously excellent, all the clouds, at building infrastructure that's beyond beautiful. So their core networking inside their data centers that power everything is amazing. But the enterprise networking, what's exposed for the average company, that's not generally the hallmark of excellence for any of these clouds. They are focused on very different services that they're trying to drive for their customers. It's also not the highest value add. What's super high value add is the applications, the data layers, the development tools, and networking is kind of a must-have down at the infrastructure as a service layer. So we are passionate about that, and we've taken a very different approach than anybody in the market that I can find so far on how we solve and simplify that networking problem.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think, it's funny. It's like 10 years ago, we started to see this movement away from the siloed clouds. Everybody was moving to a mono cloud or Team Microsoft, Team Google's. Not a lot of people were Team Google, but a lot of people Team AWS at the time. And it's kind of equalized over time. And the thing is, we saw as architects and thought leaders that was not going to be the destination. Ultimately, it was around best of breed technology that we're going to leverage. We're going to find the best AI system on one cloud, the best database on another cloud, the best business analytics system on yet another cloud. And so it's going to be a multi-cloud deployment. And so thinking ahead of that it's not going to be siloed cloud, and we're seeing this today, because that we're moving into heterogeneity and complexity that really is kind of the wall that these CIOs are hitting right now. I just read an article today where they're talking about complexity being the number one challenge that the CIOs are facing. This was the recent study, and I'll be blogging about next week in InfoWorld. And so the complexity challenge started to emerge. People were pushing back on the fact that multi-cloud was emerging. And here in 2024, it's here. In other words, we're not going to be relocating our entire infrastructure to a single cloud provider. It's going to be very heterogeneous. We're going to leverage edge-based systems, agentic AI, generative AI systems, all of this complexity out there. We need common layers to manage these things, common security layers and common database layers and common network layers. And this is something that is really kind of been evolving in the market around the needs of the market. So 2024, I think the problem is rising to the top. CIOs think they need it, and certainly is moving into generative AI is driving a lot of that because they're trying to get data under control. They're trying to get complexity and heterogeneity under control. So it seems like the multi-cloud stuff is playing right in your hands. So how do you facilitate the transition of that for a typical enterprise and moving into multi-cloud and getting to something that's a little bit more brings more value back to the business than just standing up siloed clouds?
Yes, and you were so early on this realization, this wave, David. I mean, 10 years ago, people were. I think the world really did believe would go. Everything would shift to a monocloud approach, and I was around at the same time. Very naive thinking. That's never happened in the history of any category in the world. Manufacturing, retail, it doesn't matter, and it certainly has never happened within technology. The demands on our business are so intense that you need best of breed in different areas, and one vendor cannot build the best of everything. So by default, there's going to be a multi-cloud world. And I think the world is waking up to that today. There are two elements that Aviatrix can help with in a pretty notable basis for companies. One, even if you're early in your cloud journey and all your workloads right now are just within a single cloud, the way that the cloud vendors wound up building their networking stack, sadly, is a recreation of the way it was built in the last gen data centers when we were tied to boxes. It was necessary based on the complexity for most large enterprises that they had dedicated routing, dedicated switching often from different vendors, dedicated firewall boxes, dedicated VPN boxes, dedicated DNS boxes, dedicated load balancing. You can go down the stack of all the networking vendors that are multi-billion in size. And that was a necessary framework because you had purpose-built ASICs and purpose-built software that powered those networking services. In the cloud, that wasn't necessary because now you've got this beautiful infrastructure that is unbelievably robust on a very cheap and not as high throughput and high capacity all the way through to the edge cases of incredibly high performance. And you just pay for it as you go, dial it up and down. And networking should have been built as much more of an integrated set of services, more that software-defined networking approach. And it's not the way it was built. And that's probably the two pizza box mentality that we've all adopted. But it's easiest to say, okay, you guys over here, you men and women, you go build the load balancing piece. You guys over there, you go build the routing piece. You go build the firewalling piece. Then you wind up with a lot of the inefficiencies and complexities that we had in the last gen data center that now are mirrored within cloud. So for any of you out there, if you really are able to pierce through your CSP bills, hard to do, we can help you because we are at the packet level, so we can actually see some of the actual work that's being done. You'll find that 10 to 20% of that monthly bill still is tied to networking, just like in the last gen data centers. It doesn't have to be that way. So we can simplify, we can actually extract hard dollar cost savings in most cases within a single cloud environment. We can be more performant, typically. The way we've architected, we have less latency and overhead. Part of the hard dollar cost savings is we don't drag you through data processing and egress frameworks. And we've got an efficient service that includes all the different elements of our platform. So we're not taking you in and out of services to try and get this work done either. But then we want it being much more operationally efficient, less teams needed because the simpler way that we built it, we give you visibility that you can't get from the cloud networking services. That it's all API driven, which is awesome. Big fan of microservices and APIs, but the amount of depth that's exposed is not enough for any complex workload and really frustrates the networking teams and teams above them because they can't get the type of visibility they once got when they own their own networking. Then we give you a much more fine-grained level of control. So you can actually look at traffic and bend traffic in different ways if you want to and control it, which the promise 10 years ago was you can forget about all that heavy lift infrastructure stuff like storage, networking, security. Like, we'll just take care of all that for you. All that matters is awesome developers. And that, again, super naive. It's like, do you want to make it easier? Absolutely. But if you really want to build an effective, complex app, you need people that are specialists in all those areas to make sure the thing is optimized to those areas. I never found a developer that can be as good as my best cyber person, as good as my best infrastructure person, as good as my best networking person on all those domains. They're awesome developers. Let them develop, but you got to pair them with those other folks. So we help that networking team, whether they're brand new to cloud and networking or whether they're being dragged from their on-prem CCIE basis to be able to do the job that they do with the type of visibility, control, operational efficiency that they once had. When you get to multi-cloud, now it's, as you said, I think it's a super obvious answer. None of those services, they're all built kind of similarly in a boxy, kludgy way, but they're not built the same. So at least when you owned your own data centers, you could standardize on Cisco routing and you had the exact same routing footprint, the same command line interface, the same training, no matter which data center you went to anywhere in the world. That's not the case here. When you go into routing at Microsoft, it's different than routing in AWS, and load balancing and DNSing and VPN, it's across all those services. So they didn't define it the same. They're the same commands. They didn't build the edges the same. So going back to your complexity, cloud has dramatically increased complexity. There's many, many more services than there were in your last gen data center. Much more powerful, huge fan of cloud. I've been building cloud apps since 1995, 96, before it was called cloud. The first company I founded was as a service company. So big fan of it, but you're not going to get a less complex landscape. And we really help there.
So this kind of gets to the whole architectural optimization things. We're talking about complexity. I think some of the things you're talking about is, dealing with complexity, heterogeneity. So how are you as a company approaching architectural optimization, looking at the different cloud providers and legacy systems, in essence, taking what you were just discussing down to another layer or level? In other words, what should the listeners understand what you're doing different in terms of taking their networking system, putting it in an abstraction layer, and be able to manage it better at a lower cost?
So there are two key differences about what Aviatrix does versus what any other third party will do. One, we have a data plane, so we leverage the infrastructure that you're moving your workloads to on purpose. Like we actually route packets, and that framework runs within the cloud that you're operating in. Which you look at most of the networking solutions, they're either one layer above that routing plane, or they're pulling traffic onto their own frameworks, like a typical SASE vendor, let's say, or Cloudflare, which is a great solution also, but it's not, you're not really working, you're not treating the clouds the way that you should, which is they're phenomenal data centers that have lots of optimization, and we will help you by making sure that our networking workloads are native within those clouds and they're located very close to the workloads that we're serving, right within that VPC or VNet or whatever the logical security construct is. So that's one big difference. And the other is, while there are these pretty meaningful differences between the clouds, it's our job to work to try and mask as much of those differences as possible. So there's a lot of engineering that we have to do to, one, insert our networking services, not just routing, but we do firewalling and NATing and some low-level load balancing and other core networking capabilities. But it's not work not just to insert it so that it runs natively and effectively and efficiently within those clouds. But then what do we do to try and neutralize the differences that exist within the clouds? There's some that we can't neutralize because if they don't have the capability, period, we can't usually fill in. Like we got to leverage the primitives and infrastructure that vendor has, but we neutralize most of it. So now customers get a very efficient platform because you get training once on top of the Aviatrix platform, but it gets deployed. The actual componentry gets deployed across all clouds, and the performance and the characteristics and the visibility and the enforcement is consistent across those clouds.
Yeah. And speaking of that and kind of transitioning, every cloud computing conference has become a generative AI conference.
Yes.
I'll be going to reInvent, and I'm sure it's going to be no different. So it seems to be changing the game, and certainly some of the rise we're seeing in cloud revenue is associated with a movement or even just experimentation on moving to generative AI. And so there's going to be, a shift and actually taking things that are very complex and taking data, sometimes it's dysfunctional, and the ability to use it in a more effective and efficient way. How's it changing the game for you as a company? How's it changing the game for the way clients are leveraging your technology specifically?
So one is you hinted at in the earlier question, David. I think that this whole LLM movement is just one more disruption that's going to create even more heterogeneity and complexity on the landscape. It's a brand new architecture. And we're seeing, just like every way before us, we're seeing dedicated data centers, dedicated solutions, dedicated offerings that are architected to really make the LLM footprint work effectively. And all the big cloud vendors are working hard to make sure that happens within their clouds as well. But if this follows suit to every other wave that we've seen over 60 years of computing, you're going to have very purpose-built data centers, very purpose-built offerings that are specific to agentic behavior and generative AI for the automotive industry, or for the pharma industry, or for small businesses versus large businesses. And that likely will not be the big clouds. You will use them for sure to push a bunch of data to and get some value. But it's got to be combined, I believe, with either LLMs that you own, that you have on-prem and you're directly managing, and trying to add vector DBs to and have refined data for your function or your company, or third parties. So more complex landscape. For us, that's great, because that means there's not just 5 big clouds out there that need networking connectivity in a singular level, but there's probably going to be 15 or 20 or 50. We'll see how many new core weaves and groks and there are that emerge over time.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because I'm seeing the same sort of emergence as well. I named them micro clouds, all the .ai LLMs as a service systems, and I do think it's going to get way more complex when you look at the industry specific LLMs are going to be out there, things that are associated with supply chain integration, trading of cryptocurrency, the ability to provide retail optimization, things like that. And I think that a lot of the businesses are not going to get into the rabbit hole of building LLMs themselves. They're going to be leveraging other LLMs. They are going to be building tactical use cases for generative AI, small language models, very tactical use cases for LLMs. So I guess what we're talking about here, the end of that run becomes we have more clouds to the point you just made, verifying that. We have more integrations of various systems. We have more complexity. We have more opportunities to kind of change the game and create something that's truly an innovative differentiator for the business, able to take the business to the next layer. But it seems to me that the worst job is coming up is going to be CIO, your ability to go solve these issues, because you're getting into these very complex world. A lot of stuff is being put upon you. They're probably not giving a lot of additional money.
Yes.
So what advice would you give to the CIOs out there that are facing this and their ability to kind of get things done, their ability to prioritize things that they need to do? Understanding there's no perfect answer to that question, but what will your therapy be?
So three, and we're going through the exact same thing internally. So what I'm saying is what my CFO, my CIO, and I spent a lot of time on. So three things that I think are really important is one, get super, super close to the CFO and the FinOps team. They are your friend. And there's a bunch of great tools out there that can help give detailed and increasing detailed information on how you can further optimize costs. Because this, as we all are seeing, this Gen AI stuff is not cheap. And I don't see anyone getting a 30 to 80 to 200% budget increase for their IT spend. So you're gonna have to find ways to reduce spend to actually fund that Gen AI work that the board is rightfully a lot like move to cloud. It became too coarse. Like, everyone go to cloud, shut all the data centers. Like really, the mainframe based apps, like you want to move those to the cloud. And it became such a overwhelming mantra that people weren't thinking clearly. And I'm worried about the same thing with Gen AI. Like it's awesome and it's going to change the world, but be thoughtful about it. Like, what are you springing up first, second, and third? But it costs a lot of money. The second piece is be very, very use case focused. So on the first piece, Aviatrix plug, like if you look at Aviatrix, there are hard dollar cost savings that we can generally provide for a new customer or that we're providing for our existing customers. So we can be part of that solution because we can give visibility on network spend, and it's often the data processing and egress costs and things that are very difficult to surface that if we track and trace, there's some interesting savings that could occur there. The second is be very, very use case specific. Like, what is it that you are trying to solve and for what business area? And make sure there's really tight business cases against those use cases. As an example for what we're trying to do at Aviatrix, we've broken our very broad and interesting platform down into 6 core solution patterns that we support. And just give you an idea of what those could be. Visibility, analytics and visibility as a solution pattern that doesn't require any of our networking. Like we just plug into a cloud and begin to give you analytics and visibility on your networking. Or edge to cloud connectivity. I've got a bunch of data centers I still manage. I want to make sure that I've got high performant and highly secure connectivity from that data center from the edge to the data center and back. Or core routing, like that could be another one. We'll make sure that we do backbone transit between clouds and routing inside the cloud so that you're efficient with your routing. But there's 6 of these patterns, and we're developing use cases within every one of those patterns that are very business centric. So edge to cloud is interesting. What problem are you trying to solve? Are you super acquisitive? This is a help we're trying to provide our networking buyers that are not always great at speaking business language. If you're heavy on M&A, networking becomes a bottleneck often on how quickly can I actually integrate the acquired company. And every day that we delay the integration of that company, there's huge revenue impact and huge cost impact because there's most M&A use cases or justifications are I'm going to increase my revenues. That's why I'm buying this company. And there's all these efficiencies I'm going to get once I get the other company under my wing. And systems get in the way of making that happen. So that's one use case on a solution pattern that would connect a new company that you don't know yet to your company. In this case, we can help with IP overlap and a bunch of other core sticking points that make that integration difficult. And we can do it in hours or days instead of the months that most people take. But we're trying to cast that back into the reporting to the CEO, going back to a CIO of because of this spend I just drove, I was able to enhance revenue by X% because we collapsed time, or I was able to enhance cost savings by Y% because we collapsed time on the integration. But being very, very use case driven and then very business case driven, I think is absolutely an imperative because there's going to be such a budget crush as Gen AI comes in.
Yeah, I can't agree with you more. And the thing is, and also too, we're touting generalization, the ability to leverage common services that will reduce some cost. I mean, these things are going to be a little bit courting and spending to make this happen, but we can't move at the speed that we want to move with the complexity that we're dealing with, the heterogeneity we're dealing with, and having the talent crunch and lack of network engineers, things like that. And so the ability is just so important to look for commonality. And we're talking about network commonality, but also security commonality and data commonality, app dev test commonality. And that seems to be the key to a lot of this is the ability to kind of move in that direction. Just CIOs, the minute they start thinking strategically about this, suddenly the market shifts. Now it's toward AI, and they have another set of things to worry about, and that becomes kind of the gauntlet that they're facing right now. There's lots of CIOs who listen to this YouTube video and this podcast. They're just nodding their head that that's what they're facing. So within your company, as a network, as ultimately being a critical component of the IT stack, what investments is your company making to enhance these capabilities, and how do you see this affecting the overall IT landscape moving forward? So, what are you talking about in the board of directors meeting as to where strategically you're taking your business, or what can you talk about?
Some exciting stuff out there. So, but closing on your last comment, David, um, as a CIO, if you are not aggressively thinking about as the third step, how do I avoid lock-in and how do I maintain flexibility, which tools like Aviatrix can help you with, but you need it, as you're saying, across the different core dimensions. It's going to be really hard for you to get through this cost crunch. So I know it's self-serving to say, but we do the same thing internally within our IT team. So, and we are an Aviatrix user as well, but you need portability. And if you don't have it at the networking layer, you're in deep trouble because that's the foundation of everything. But then you need it at the compute level, you need it at the storage level, you need it at the app level. So always be thinking about how do I get portability so that you can actually have some leverage with your CSPs who are providing this amazing set of services, but you just can't do it if you're trapped. So transitioning that to Gen AI and what do we think about in the future? As you highlighted, networking skills are in short supply. We have this awesome program called ACE, and Aviatrix Cloud Engineer, which is an advancement of the Cisco Certified Internet Engineer, but for cloud, where we're trying our best to help the world. And we've educated over 30,000 people so far. And we just made our training free. So get out there and take the training. But trying to educate the world and get more network engineers. But ultimately, we need a lot more assistance. And that's where I think generative AI can really, really play, it needs to play a massive role. The complexity that our systems are going to have to go through so they can be as responsive as they need to, just if I take the security angle, like when you've got a true revolution of the agentic orientation, which we're seeing used by the bad guys as more aggressively than most, the dynamic nature of your one, I don't think that any of us are going to be able to defend ourselves by ourselves. Like we're going to need to band together and help each other because the adversaries are so well funded, a lot of them by the nation states that we talk about all the time. So it's a formidable group. But then your systems are going to have to be super adaptive and agile. And I don't know how that happens without heavy investments in Gen AI. So we've been doing the same. Like we're all early in that wave. But the goal that we have for our AI teams is first just really effective assistance to make the humans smarter, but ultimately to have self-healing, self-reconfiguring, fully adaptive networks that still have the human in the loop, but are taking over more and more of the work so that you can have millisecond or sub-millisecond response time on some of this stuff, because I think that's what we'll need. Luckily, this whole thing takes time to bake out before the tech is good enough for the adversaries to be as aggressive as I think we all are theorizing they will be. But we're trying to go as fast as we can so we can be part of that fold of next gen networking.
Yeah, what I like about your strategy is that you're defining this down to a value that the technology is able to take on. You're not just telling me that we are going to use generative AI as your strategic purpose. You're defining the actual purpose and the value that's going to bring to your client. And that's something that's refreshing now because I'm sitting in lots of briefings and I'm just hearing, the checkbox conversation, and even lots of people who are defining the technology strategy that probably don't understand AI as well as they should, but are looking to integrate it into their core products. And my concern would be is that they don't do that correctly. Having been a CTO many times, and having defined these strategies, and that's a tough thing to do. So understanding the basics of the technology, how it's going to add value to your stuff, and also how it's not going to add value to your stuff. I don't think everybody needs to drag generative AI and hook, line, and sinker. I think people that are looking for the strategic value and how to align their products to it are the
Yes.
ones that are going to win the game, because they're going to optimize their spend. They're not going to waste money. They're going to spend the money on R&D and improving their products, and therefore they're going to produce a better product in the marketplace. Does that make sense to you, or is that
100%. I mean, one, as we were briefly talking about earlier, it's so much more complex than people believe when you really dive in. It reminds me of trying to build multi-tiered internet apps in 1996, 97, 98. When we didn't have all the layers of a next-gen multi-tiered internet native framework built yet. And that's what it feels like today. Is like there's so much bubble gum and baling wire that you've got to insert to actually make that whole stack work. So you better be really motivated. You better be clear. Like, one, is it a Gen AI use case or not? We can't forget about AI has got a whole spectrum of different capabilities, and classic machine learning is super valuable. And like Gen AI only solves some problems. And then is it a big enough problem that the juices could be worth the squeeze? And there are big problems out there. Like when I think about dynamic networking, like we're going back and forth. There are some things that, like dynamic routing, there are some things that Gen AI can help on, but there's just a lot of classic ML that's needs to be applied to the problem as well. But the outcome has got to be the same, which is how are you constantly increasing the seeking of optimal pathing with a whole host of other attributes around it that might be security and defensibility and encryption, and so that the networks can be as adaptive as possible. But we're balancing that. Like, where else in the networking stack, where will the payoff be felt with the most impact at first? Is it could be more firewalling? Is it could be more natting? Is it could be more of the routing optimization? Is it just day two operations in general? Or so we're still doing a lot of searching to make sure that where we're applying our engineering is that will run the right experiments, that will get the right signals.
Yeah, one of the things my students tell me, I'm teaching a generative AI architecture class, I have been for a while, is they're kind of taken back by the number of times that it's not the application, it's not something that you use. And we spend a lot of time kind of going through that, your ability to prove its value, and understanding this thing is 3 to 5 times more expensive to build traditional systems, even traditional ML environments. And that seems to be the struggle right now. It's understanding the value of the technology. It's hugely powerful technology. It's going to do a lot of good, but has to be applied in the right proper use cases, the point you just made. So even, talking about things like over engineering, cloud-based generative AI systems, a lot of that stuff's been going on lately. I've been writing and speaking about it, and we're talking about it here on this YouTube channel. How does Aviatrix ensure that its solution remain cost effective without compromising on performance?
Yeah, that's really, really important to our company. And I'd say that wasn't one of the top 5 things we were focused on at first, is how efficiently do we run inside those clouds. We were just trying to make sure we had the right feature set and the right compelling value prop to folks, irrespective of what the cost was. We are pretty efficient. Like we actually, going back to the cost savings, like when we look at an account, 9 times out of 10 we'll wind up saving the money on what they'd be spending on networking, and part of that savings is what's the infrastructure drag that we carry, because we're running on top of EC2 and we're using storage and we're using the networking.
Absolutely. That's you said something earlier that just kind of meant a lot to me. Your success at Splunk was you surrounded yourself with very capable people. I'm paraphrasing, but you kind of said something like that.
Yes,
So,
great team.
what have been the key achievements of your leadership team at Aviatrix, and how have they contributed to the company's growth, technology advancements, things like that? What makes you most proud about the team that you have?
Um, so I'll peel back, and the way I entered, one of the reasons I joined Aviatrix, I love the problem we solve, and networking needs so much help. And so I feel, not because they're bad, because they've got a really hard job, and people don't understand how hard the job is. So it goes back to, there's a noble cause. Right? Networking is the foundation of everything that our tech lives are dependent upon. most people don't understand it, and the networking teams aren't getting the assistance that they need. So our core mission is, how do we make networking cool again, and how do we elevate the network engineering heroes
I mean,
that are.
networking was not cool. What are
It's
you
crazy,
talking
huh?
about?
I know. I remember back in the 90s and 2000s, like if you worked at Cisco or if you were a network engineer, you were the king of the hill, and that shifted. But we need to help bring that back with your help and other networking vendors, and it's just so mission critical to what we do. So that was a strong draw. But on top of that, the board, I've worked closely with 3 of the 5 board members, and we've got a really, really good board that's very tight and cohesive. Because my approach coming in was, networking is really, really difficult. There are very few companies that over the past 15, 20 years that have gotten to self-sustaining mode in the networking industry. I think Arista is probably the last great networking company formed. And we intend to be the next one. I think that cloud dislocation and multi-cloud can help fuel that. But coming in, my approach was, given how hard networking is, and we've been in business close to 9 years when I joined the company, like I've got to learn. I've got to spend a lot of time listening to the teams. Before I got there, the exec team had turned over. So I walked in with over 20 direct reports that were VPs and directors. And I spent a lot of time really working through that team so I could understand more deeply. So what's really going on in demand gen, or what's really going on in sales ops, or what's really going on in our SRE team in engineering, and that helped a lot to both educate me and elevate the work that the team has been doing, but then also try and triangulate a little bit better on the leaders that we've been bringing in, because I have largely built out the exec team now. And what I'm most proud of is the work that the teams have been doing through the years is really, really interesting and admirable. And the response that I'm seeing within the company to some of the new ideas and new leadership that we're bringing in is also, people are really hungry. Like, this is not I did it my way. Yeah. Don't tell me how to do it differently. Learning and growth mindset is so important to me. We look like our customers. Network engineers are no BS, hardworking, self-taught, yeah, doing yeoman's work, and we look like that. It's like, how do I get better? Tell me, if you're going to come in and you're going to make me better, I'm super excited. Like, help me my career, help me do my job better, help my peers better, and that my excitement a year in is I love that culture, and I just want to keep finding ways to emphasize that more.
Last question, and I think it's an important question. So, looking into the future, what are the couple of things you're most excited about, but also what are the couple of things that you're most concerned about? And not just in general in the marketplace that we're in, doesn't have to be related directly to the company.
Um, when ChatGPT 3 hit, I think, like a lot of people in the world, I went through a complete panic for about 6 months. Um, like Yuval Harari came out with his, very clear communication of human beings are doomed, and I went through that same, and I switched from fear to excitement. So I know everyone's so excited about this, but I, I can't. I'm so excited to see what can more investment in AI, and what can LLMs and generative AI, what will it do to every profession, every industry around the world, and we're just beginning to scratch the surface. Um, there's there's a lot of benefit that comes from that. So I think it'll lift a lot of boats across every industry. We're seeing energy generation stocks go through the roof, and rare earth mining stocks go through the roof as people are tracing what is it, what is it going to impact, and who's going to benefit. My fears are more in the 7 to 15 year trajectory. How good does it get? How out of control does it get? And what happens to overall labor markets and the need for humans, and how do we handle that transition? When I look back 300 years ago to the last massive dislocation, the Industrial Revolution, it was a pretty chaotic 50 to 100 years. And I worry about that, but I can't control it. So all I can do is participate in the wave and try our best for our little part to make it as positive and beneficially impactful as possible. And but those are probably my biggest 2 buckets of big excitement areas and big worry areas.
Yeah, it's funny. It always comes up as a scary issue, but it seems like we're always okay out of the industrial revolution, things like that. We just find better things for humans to do, and I just kind of have faith in our ability to utilize technology to the benefit of the human beings at the end of the day.
Me too.
And even abstracting us out of some of the mundane stuff and doing what humans do best. We're innovative. We're innovative creatures. AI can't do that. It can't create a net new thought. It just basically has to reuse existing stuff and training data, having been an AI engineer for 30 years. Doug, I couldn't be more happy to have this conversation with you. You guys are doing some great things at Aviatrix. And, ultimately, this is something that I'm passionate about, the ability to find generality and commonality with different layers. The networking is a huge opportunity, I think, for the industry right now, the ability to normalize the complexity and the heterogeneity out there to get to more of a cost-effective stand. And I think you guys are fighting the good fight. So your information is going to be linked down below. Is anything else you want to add before we cut?
One, really enjoyed the conversation. I've been following you for a while, and it's great to get some time together. Thank you for all the incredible work you do in a very hands-on, practical, and helpful manner, educating people on a lot of these very difficult topics that we all need to understand. And it takes time to understand them. I'll just echo what you said, which is the world is changing at such a fast rate, and there's so much excitement out there. Every industry is going to look radically different 3 to 5 years from now because of these changes, and networking is foundational to it. And you please look at something like Aviatrix. You don't have to choose us, but really be aware that networking is mission critical. The default of just taking whatever is in front of you often is not the best choice. And take your time and vendor selection. It's the value that we can add, that we are adding to our customers and we can add to other customers is really, really deep. It's been one of my excitements of joining the company and digging deeper. We're adding tens of millions of dollars back to the pocketbooks of some of our customers and enabling them to do things that they just literally couldn't do without us, around international expansion or integrating with key partners or accelerating an M&A capability that's critical to their business initiatives. So thank you for giving me a chance to update the world a little bit on what we're doing.
Well, thanks for updating our listeners, and I will continue to keep a close eye on you. All right, everybody, don't forget to like and subscribe. Also, comment below. Check out my other stuff, InfoWorld blog, LinkedIn Learning courses, book, Cloud Computing Insider, as well as the podcast, and also the LinkedIn stream that's going to be part of this. So you guys take care. I'll talk to you next week. Cheers.